The sun over Bel Air wasn't the same sun that baked the asphalt of Isabella's neighborhood. Here it seemed filtered golden a spotlight for the wealth it illuminated. For the staff, however, it was just hot. Isabella Rossi, balancing a tray of glistening champagne flutes, felt a bead of sweat trace a path down her spine, a stark contrast to the cool, shimmering blue of the infinity pool beside her. She was a ghost in this world meant to be invisible. But in moments, a cruel prank would make her the center of everyone's attention, leading to a humiliation she'd never forget, and an intervention so stunning it would shatter the lives of the powerful and change hers forever. The air at the Davenport estate was thick with the scent of money, a cloying mix of expensive perfume, freshly cut grass, and the faint, clean tang of chlorine. For Isabella Izzy Rossi, it was the smell of another grueling 8-hour shift. Each step she took on the imported Italian marble surrounding the pool was a careful calculation. Don't spill. Don't make eye contact unless spoken to. Don't exist beyond the crisp white blouse and black trousers of her catering uniform. Izzy was 22, but some days she felt 100. Her life was a split screen. By day she was an artist, her small studio apartment crammed with canvases that smelled of turpentine and of possibility. Her hands, usually stained with cobalt blue and cadmium yellow, were now scrubbed raw, clutching a silver tray. By night and on weekends like this, she was a server pouring drinks for people who spent more on a weekend getaway than she made in a year. The money was a means to an end. One more semester paid at the community college, another set of high-quality oil paints, another step closer to her application for the prestigious San Francisco Art Institute. That dream was the only thing that made the condescending glances and dismissive waves of a hand bearable. The party was in full swing. Young men with effortless tans and boat shoes stood in clusters, their laughter loud and confident. Women who looked like they were sculpted from porcelain and silk lounged on chaises, their sunglasses hiding any genuine expression. They were the children of CEOs, hedge fund managers, and old money socialites. Today's event was a birthday party for Tiffany Davenport, the heiress to her father's real estate empire, and she held court like a modern-day queen. Tiffany was beautiful in the way a venomous flower is perfectly formed, brightly colored, and dangerous to the touch. She moved through her party not as a hostess, but as a predator, surveying her territory. Her eyes, a cold, pale blue, scanned the crowd, and when they landed on Izzy, they narrowed with a familiar flicker of contempt. This wasn't the first time Izzy had worked a Davenport party. She had learned to anticipate Tiffany's particular brand of cruelty. It was never overt enough to warrant a formal complaint, but always sharp enough to sting. A forgotten please or thank you. A muttered comment about the staff being slow. A deliberate placement of an empty glass on the very edge of a table, daring her to have it fall. Today, Tiffany seemed particularly emboldened, flanked by her boyfriend, Chadwick "Chad" Preston. Chad was the epitome of inherited privilege, a handsome athletic build from years of private tennis lessons, and a personality that had never been challenged. He moved with an unearned swagger, his arm possessively around Tiffany's waist. "Oh, look, Chad," Tiffany said, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by those around them as Izzy approached to offer them drinks. "It's the artiste." She pronounced the word with mocking French inflection. Izzy's stomach tightened. A few months ago, at a smaller gallery event, she'd worked a local art critic, had taken a surprising interest in a small charcoal sketch Izzy had been commissioned to do for the event's decor. He had spoken to her for a few minutes, his praise audible to the nearby guests, one of whom had been Tiffany. The brief moment of recognition had been intoxicating for Izzy, but it had also painted a target on her back. To Tiffany, Izzy wasn't a person with a dream. She was the hired help who had dared to step out of her place for a fleeting moment. Izzy kept her face a mask of professional neutrality. "Champagne," she asked, her voice even. Chad smirked, taking 2 glasses. "You know, I've been thinking," he said, looking at Izzy, but speaking to Tiffany. "Maybe we should hire her to paint the pool house. She could do some abstract splotches." Very modern. The group around them chuckled. Izzy felt a hot flush of anger creep up her neck, but she bit it down. Reacting was what they wanted. It would give them power. She gave a tight, polite nod and began to turn away. "Where are you going?" Tiffany's voice was sharp. "We're not done with you." Izzy froze. She could feel the eyes of the nearby guests turning towards the unfolding drama like spectators at a Roman circus. Her manager, a perpetually stressed man named Robert, was on the other side of the pool, deliberately looking away. He knew as well as she did that the Davenports were a major client. Complaining was professional suicide. "I have other guests to attend to." "Miss Davenport," Izzy said, keeping her gaze fixed on a point just over Tiffany's shoulder. "But we're the most important guests," Chad slurred slightly, his confidence inflated by alcohol and the attention of his audience. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. "Tiffany asked you a question." The air crackled with tension. Izzy's heart hammered against her ribs. She felt trapped, the shimmering pool on one side and a wall of sneering faces on the other. All she wanted was to finish her shift, go home, and lose herself in the familiar, comforting world of her canvases. But it was becoming clear they weren't going to let her go that easily. From a shaded wicker chair under a large palm tree, an older man watched the scene unfold. He was dressed simply in a linen shirt and tan trousers, looking more like a forgotten grandfather than a guest at this lavish affair. He nursed a single glass of iced tea, his face etched with the deep lines of a long, observant life. No one paid him any mind. He was just part of the scenery. But his eyes, a piercing shade of grey, missed nothing. He watched the calculated cruelty of the young woman, the brutish arrogance of her boyfriend, and the quiet, simmering dignity of the waitress. He didn't move. He just watched and waited. The laughter of the surrounding guests acted as fuel for Tiffany and Chad, and it was an intoxicating sound, for them the audible approval of their peers confirming their status at the top of this sun-drenched food chain. For Izzy, it was a tightening vice. Every titter, every snicker was a reminder of her powerlessness. "I believe I asked what you thought of Chad's generous offer." Tiffany pressed her lips, curling into a smug smile. She took a step forward, her designer sandal tapping impatiently on the marble. "To paint the pool house. Surely an aspiring artiste like you would jump at the chance to work on a Davenport property. It would be great for your, what do you call it, your portfolio." The word portfolio was laced with such venomous sarcasm, it felt like a physical slap. Izzy knew they were trying to break her. They wanted tears, a panicked retort, anything that would confirm their superiority. She took a slow, steadying breath, the scent of chlorine sharp in her nostrils. "I appreciate the thought," Izzy said, her voice miraculously steady. "But my commissions are currently closed. Now if you'll excuse me." She made to step around them, her tray held high like a shield. But Chad, emboldened and annoyed by her composure, moved to block her path. He was taller than her by a head, broader by a mile, and he used his physical presence to intimidate, leaning in so she could smell the champagne on his breath. Not so fast, he drawled, a lazy, cruel grin spreading across his face. "You know you look a little hot. All that running around, serving your betters. It must be exhausting." He looked at Tiffany, who gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It was the signal, the permission, the silent command. The circle of onlookers leaned in their phones, subtly rising, as if to capture a rare animal sighting. This was the entertainment they had been waiting for. "You should cool off," Chad said, his grin widening. And then it happened. It wasn't a violent, aggressive shove. It was casual, almost lazy, a flick of his wrist against her shoulder. But it was perfectly timed, perfectly placed. Izzy was off balance, her work shoes offering no grip on the slick marble. The tray of empty glasses went flying, a brief, chaotic constellation of crystal before it crashed onto the patio. Izzy's arms flailed for a moment, a desperate, silent plea for purchase in the empty air. Then she fell backward into the pool. The shock of the cold water was a violent gasp. It stole her breath, filled her ears, and plastered her uniform to her skin. For a split second, there was silence, the world a distorted, wavering blue. Then the laughter erupted. It wasn't a chuckle. It was a roar, a braying, unrestrained tidal wave of ridicule that washed over her even as she struggled to the surface. She came up sputtering, hair in her eyes, the chlorinated water stinging them. She looked towards the edge of the pool and saw a gallery of laughing faces. Chad was bent over, howling with glee. Tiffany stood with her arms crossed, a look of supreme satisfaction on her face, as if she had just executed a brilliant strategic maneuver. People were pointing, some were filming, their phones held high. Humiliation, cold and sharp, pierced through the shock of the water. It was worse than the fall, worse than the cold. It was the feeling of being turned into an object of sport, a spectacle for the bored and wealthy. Her cheap work clothes felt heavy, pulling her down, a physical manifestation of her station in life. She kicked towards the side, her movements clumsy, her dignity stripped away with every stroke. Her manager, Robert, finally scurried over his face, a mess of panic and appeasement. "Miss Davenport, Mr. Preston. An accident?" I'm sure he chirped, avoiding eye contact with the drenched and shivering Izzy. "Of course it was an accident," Tiffany said sweetly, her eyes glittering with malice. "The girl is clumsy. She probably can't even walk and carry a tray at the same time. You should really hire more competent help, Robert." Robert wrung his hands. "Yes, Miss Davenport. Of course." "My sincerest apologies." He shot a furious, terrified glare at Izzy, as if it were her fault. Izzy's hands finally found the rough edge of the pool. She hauled herself out, water sluicing from her clothes, forming a dark puddle on the pristine white marble. She didn't look at Robert. She didn't look at the laughing crowd. She looked directly at Tiffany and Chad. Her hair was dripping into her eyes, her mascara probably running her body, shivering uncontrollably. But for the first time that day, she let the fire inside her show in her gaze. She didn't say a word. The silence of her stare was more potent than any curse she could have uttered. Chad's laughter faltered for a second under the weight of her glare. Tiffany, however, was unmoved. "What are you looking at?" she snapped. "Go! Get out of here. You're dripping all over the patio." Izzy pushed a wet strand of hair from her face. She felt a strange calm settle over her. The worst had happened. She had been publicly humiliated. There was nothing more they could do to her. With as much dignity as she could muster, she turned her back on them and began the long, lonely walk across the patio towards the service entrance, leaving a trail of water and shattered pride behind her. The laughter followed her, a cruel soundtrack to her shame. But the laughter was starting to die down. A new silence was spreading from one corner of the party, a silence that was heavy and unnerving. The older man in the linen shirt had risen from his chair. He hadn't said a word. He had simply stood up. But his presence, once invisible, now seemed to command the space. He watched Izzy's retreating, drenched figure with an unreadable expression. Then his cold grey eyes slowly panned across the crowd, landing first on the catering manager, then on the laughing guests, and finally they settled on Tiffany and Chad. The party wasn't over. It was just getting started. The shift in the atmosphere was palpable. It began as a subtle change in pressure, the way the air feels just before a storm breaks. The raucous laughter first dwindled to nervous chuckles, then to silence, as more and more people noticed the man who was now standing near the center of the patio. He wasn't large or physically imposing, yet he projected an aura of absolute authority that rippled through the crowd of entitled heirs and heiresses. He was Arthur Vance, a name that, if they had known, it would have sent a jolt of pure terror through every single guest, and especially through the Davenport and Preston families. But they didn't know. To them, he was just a nameless old man who was killing the vibe. Chad was the first to break the uneasy silence. "Hey, old-timer parties this way," he said, with a dismissive gesture. "Don't get lost, Grandpa." Arthur Vance's gaze remained fixed on him, his expression unchanging. He didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate step forward. He seemed to take in the entire scene, the broken glass from Izzy's tray glittering on the marble, the dark trail of water leading to the service door, the smug look on Tiffany's face, and the cowardly posture of Robert, the catering manager. Robert, sensing a new locus of power and potential trouble, bustled forward. "Sir, is there a problem? Can I get you another iced tea?" he asked, trying to steer the old man back to his seat and restore the party's shallow merriment. Arthur Vance finally spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it was low and resonant, cutting through the air with the clarity of a diamond blade. It was a voice accustomed to being obeyed without question. "A problem?" He repeated, his eyes still locked on Chad. "Yes, I believe there is." "Tell me, young man," he said, his gaze flicking to Chad's designer polo shirt. "What is your name?" Chad puffed out his chest, misinterpreting the question as a sign of deference. "Chadwick Preston. My father is Daniel Preston." He said the name as if it were a royal title, expecting it to impress. It did. But not in the way he hoped. A flicker of something recognition, perhaps disappointment, crossed Arthur's face. "Daniel Preston," he murmured almost to himself. "A good man, works hard. I wonder what he would think of his son's character." Chad's smirk faltered. "What's that supposed to mean? Who the hell are you, anyway?" Tiffany, sensing a loss of control, stepped forward. "This is a private party," she announced, her voice sharp with indignation. "I think you should leave. Now." Arthur Vance turned his piercing grey eyes on her. "This is a private party," he agreed softly. "But I fear you are mistaken as to whose." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. A chilling realization began to dawn on the faces of the guests, who were older, more attuned to the nuances of power in this city. The simple linen shirt, the unassuming demeanor, it wasn't the look of a crasher. It was the look of someone so powerful he didn't need to advertise it. Arthur's gaze swept over the crowd. "My name is Arthur Vance," he said, his voice remaining level. "And this is my house." The name hit the crowd like a physical blow. Arthur Vance, not just a millionaire, but a titan. The founder and CEO of Vance Industries, a sprawling global conglomerate with interests in technology, real estate, and finance. He was a legend notoriously private, a man who hadn't been photographed publicly in over a decade. The Davenports didn't just have a business relationship with Vance Industries. Their entire real estate development firm was heavily leveraged with financing from one of Vance's subsidiary banks. Daniel Preston wasn't just an employee. He was the executive vice president of Vance Industries' North American division. The silence was now absolute, broken only by the gentle lapping of water in the pool. Chad's face had gone from tan to a pasty, sickly white. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like he might faint. Tiffany looked as if she had been turned to stone, her mouth slightly agape, her cold blue eyes wide with dawning horror. "I lent my home to my nephew for his charity fundraiser." Arthur continued, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "I was told it would be a gathering of respectable young adults. I see now that I was grievously misinformed." He took another step, closing the distance, until he was standing directly in front of Chad and Tiffany. They both flinched, as if he had brandished a weapon. "You," he said to Tiffany, "find it amusing to torment a young woman who is working hard to make a living. You who have never worked a day in your life. You believe your father's name gives you the right to be cruel." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Let me assure you it does not." He then turned to Chad. "And you. You physically assaulted her. You find humor in humiliation. You use your father's name, Daniel's name, as a shield." Arthur's eyes narrowed. "Let's see how strong that shield is." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple, old-fashioned mobile phone. With his thumb, he scrolled through his contacts and pressed a button. He put the phone to his ear, his gaze never leaving Chad's terrified face. The entire party stood frozen, listening. "Daniel," Arthur Vance said into the phone, his voice calm and clear. "Arthur Vance here. I'm at my home. Your son Chadwick is here as well. Yes, he's right in front of me." There was a pause. The entire world seemed to shrink to the space between Arthur's mouth and the phone. "Daniel, I have to be frank. I've just witnessed your son, encouraged by his girlfriend, physically assault a member of the catering staff for his own amusement. He pushed her into my pool in front of 50 people. No, I am not mistaken." Chad began to tremble, a low, guttural sound of pure panic escaping his throat. "Character is everything, Daniel. You know I believe that. It is the foundation upon which we build everything else." Arthur continued, his voice hardening. "And what I have seen today is a catastrophic failure of character. It speaks to his upbringing. It speaks to the values he holds. And it makes me question the judgment of those I place in positions of leadership." He paused again, a silence that stretched for an eternity. "I think it's time for you to take a long overdue vacation, Daniel. A permanent one. We'll have HR contact you on Monday to discuss the terms of your severance. I am deeply, deeply disappointed." He ended the call without waiting for a reply and slipped the phone back into his pocket. The sound of Chad's world imploding was a ragged, desperate gasp. His father, his powerful, untouchable father, had just been fired in a 30-second phone call because of him. Arthur Vance then turned his attention back to the catering manager, Robert, who was now sweating profusely, his face the color of ash. You stood by and did nothing. You valued a client's money over your employee's dignity. You are a coward. Pack up your things. Your company's contract with all Vance properties is terminated, effective immediately." Robert's legs gave out, and he sank to his knees. Finally, Arthur Vance's gaze swept across the silent, horrified faces of the guests. "The party is over," he announced, his voice echoing in the stunning silence. "Leave. All of you. Now." There was no argument. There was only a frantic, silent scramble as $100 million worth of privilege and entitlement fled the scene, their laughter replaced by the sound of their own panicked footsteps. Within minutes, the magnificent patio was empty, save for one trembling boy, one frozen girl, a kneeling manager, and the quiet old man who had, in the space of 5 minutes, dismantled their entire world. The silence that descended upon the patio was heavier than the preceding noise. The half-eaten canapes, the abandoned cocktails, and the glittering shards of broken glass were the only evidence of the party that had been. Chad Preston was still standing, but he was a statue of despair, his eyes hollow and vacant. He looked at Tiffany not with affection, but with a dawning, venomous resentment. This was her fault. Her goading her arrogance had led to this. Tiffany, for her part, seemed unable to process the magnitude of the catastrophe. Her family's financial well-being was intricately tied to her father's ability to secure financing, and deals many of which depended on the goodwill of the financial ecosystem that Arthur Vance commanded. Mr. Vance hadn't even needed to make a call to her father. The social and financial fallout from this incident would be swift and brutal. The Davenports would become pariahs. "Get him off my property," Arthur said, his voice quiet but firm, nodding towards Chad. He then looked at Tiffany. "You too. Go home and tell your father what you've done. Tell him to expect a call from his bank on Monday morning." It was a simple statement, delivered without malice, but it was a death sentence to their social and financial standing. Tiffany's face for the first time crumpled. The mask of cruel confidence shattered, revealing a terrified young woman. Without a word, she turned and fled, not with grace, but in a clumsy, panicked run. Chad stumbled after her, the two of them united only in their shared ruin. Robert, the catering manager, was still on his knees, mumbling apologies to the marble floor. Arthur gave him a look of profound distaste. "Get up. Clean up this mess. Send me a final bill. Then you will leave and never return." Having passed his judgment, Arthur Vance's entire demeanor softened. The formidable titan of industry receded, replaced by the quiet, observant man he had been before. He walked over to the service entrance, the one Izzy had disappeared through moments before, and pushed it open gently. He found her in the staff changing area, a small sterile room that smelled of disinfectant. She had wrapped herself in a thin, scratchy towel provided by the company and was sitting on a bench, shivering, though more from shock than cold now. Her work bag was at her feet, and she was staring at the linoleum floor, her mind a million miles away. She hadn't heard the drama unfold outside. The soundproofing of the main house was too effective. She just knew she had been humiliated and would probably be fired. "Miss Rossi!" Izzy's head snapped up. She was startled to see the old man from the party, the one who had just been sitting there watching. Her first instinct was fear. Maybe he was a friend of the Davenports, come to scold her further. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'll be out of your way in just a moment. I was just trying to—" "You have nothing to apologize for," Arthur said gently. He was holding a thick plush bathrobe from the house. It was a deep navy blue and looked incredibly soft. "I brought you this. You must be freezing." He held it out to her. Izzy looked from the robe to his face, confused. His eyes held no judgment, only a quiet concern. Hesitantly she took it. It was warm and heavy, a small act of kindness, so unexpected it almost brought her to tears. "Thank you," she whispered, pulling it around her shoulders. "My name is Arthur Vance," he said, taking a seat on the bench opposite her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "This is my home, and I would like to offer you my most sincere apology for what happened out there. My hospitality was abused, and you were the victim of that abuse." Izzy stared at him, her mind struggling to connect the dots. "Arthur Wilkins, the reclusive billionaire," here talking to her. She had seen his picture once in a business magazine her economics professor had shown the class. The man in front of her was older, his face more deeply lined, but the piercing eyes were the same. You're Mr. Vance," she stammered. "I am," he said with a small, sad smile. "And I am ashamed of my guests. Their behavior was reprehensible." A wave of conflicting emotions washed over Izzy, relief, confusion, and a surge of vindication. I saw you," she said. "You were watching." "Yes," Arthur admitted. I find you can learn a great deal about a person's character by watching how they behave when they think no one of consequence is looking. I watched Miss Davenport and Mr. Preston, and I watched you. He leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. They showed me their arrogance and their cruelty. But you showed me something far more remarkable. Dignity. You were outnumbered, humiliated, and assaulted. Yet you pulled yourself out of that pool, and you looked them in the eye. You didn't shrink. In that moment, drenched and shivering, you were more powerful than any of them. Izzy felt a blush creep up her neck this time, not from anger or shame, but from the weight of his unexpected praise. She had felt so small, so utterly defeated. To hear that someone had seen strength in her lowest moment was disarming. I just wanted the shift to be over, she confessed quietly. I know, he said. Can I ask what you do when you're not working at events like this? Hesitantly at first, and then with growing confidence, as he listened with genuine interest, Izzy told him. She told him about her cramped apartment, her canvases, the smell of oil paints that she loved more than anything. She told him about her dream of attending the Art Institute, of wanting to create art that made people feel something, that told a story. She pulled out her phone and with trembling hands showed him pictures of her work. They were stunning. Portraits that captured a raw, fleeting emotion in a subject's eyes. Landscapes that were moody and atmospheric, full of color and light. Still lifes that made the mundane seem beautiful. Arthur Vance, a man who sat on the boards of museums and owned works by Matisse and Rothko, looked through the small phone's gallery in silence. He wasn't just looking. He was seeing. He recognized the talent, but more than that, he recognized the soul behind it. This is extraordinary work, Miss Rossi, he said, his voice full of a new respect. Truly extraordinary. He fell silent for a moment, a thoughtful expression on his face. Izzy waited, her heart pounding. She thought he might offer her some money, a check, to compensate her for the ruined clothes and the humiliation. It would be a generous gesture, and she would be grateful for it. But Arthur Vance had something else in mind. What he was about to propose was not a handout. It was an investment in the character he had just witnessed. Miss Rossi, he began, his grey eyes meeting hers. A person's character is the only true currency they have in this world. Wealth, status, power. It can all be gone in an instant, as a few people discovered today. But character, that is forged in moments like the one you endured by the pool, it is priceless. He stood up. I run an educational foundation, the Vance Foundation for the Arts and Humanities. One of its primary functions is to identify and sponsor gifted individuals who have the talent but not the means to pursue their dreams. It's for people with character. Izzy's breath hitched. She didn't dare to hope. On Monday, Arthur Vance said, my foundation's director will call you. He will be offering you a full 4-year scholarship to the San Francisco Art Institute, covering your tuition, housing, and all your materials. We will also provide you with a monthly stipend so that you never have to work another catering job again. He smiled. Unless you want to. Tears, hot and unstoppable, finally welled in Izzy's eyes and spilled down her cheeks. They weren't tears of sadness or humiliation, but of overwhelming, earth-shattering gratitude. The dream she had fought for, sacrificed for, been humiliated for, it was being handed to her. Not because of pity, but because a powerful man had looked past her uniform and seen her worth. But that's not all, Arthur added. When you graduate, the foundation will sponsor your first solo gallery exhibition, in a proper gallery. We will handle the promotion, the venue, everything. All you have to do is the one thing you were born to do." He paused, his eyes twinkling. "You just have to paint." 2 years later, the air didn't smell of chlorine and condescension. It smelled of gallery white paint, fine wine, and success. The light wasn't the harsh, judgmental glare of the Bel Air sun, but the soft, focused glow of track lighting, each beam aimed at a canvas that bore a piece of Isabella Rossi's soul. This was her night, the opening of her first solo exhibition, Portraits of Resilience, at a chic gallery in downtown San Francisco. Izzy moved through the crowded room not as an invisible server, but as the celebrated artist at the center of it all. She wore a simple, elegant black dress. Her hair was styled artfully, and her hands, though clean, bore the faint, permanent stains of paint under her fingernails, a badge of honor. She exuded a quiet confidence that had been forged not just in the art studio, but in the crucible of that day by the pool. The gallery was buzzing. Critics whispered in corners, collectors with discreet checkbooks pointed at their favorite pieces, and friends from art school hugged her, their faces beaming with pride. Her paintings lined the walls, a testament to the journey she had taken. There were portraits of ordinary people captured with an empathy that made them extraordinary. A tired-looking line, Cookie's face, a road map of long shifts. An elderly woman sitting on a park bench, a universe of stories in her eyes. Each canvas was imbued with a deep understanding of the dignity found in everyday life. In a quiet corner, away from the main throng, stood Arthur Vance. He looked much the same, dressed in an impeccably tailored but understated suit. He held a glass of mineral water and watched Izzy with the proud, beaming face of a mentor or a grandfather. He had been true to his word, and then some. His foundation had not only funded her education, but had provided her with mentorship and connections that were invaluable. They had become unlikely friends, sharing lunches where they discussed art philosophy and the nature of character. "You did it, kid," he said, his voice warm as she approached him. "We did it, Arthur," she corrected him with a smile. "Thank you. For everything." "Nonsense," he waved a hand dismissively. "I just opened a door. You were the one who had the courage and talent to walk through it and build the whole house. Look at this." He gestured around the room. "You're telling stories that matter." A red "Sold" sticker was already next to the largest painting in the collection. It was a striking piece different from the others. It depicted a woman, drenched and shivering, pulling herself from a shimmering blue pool. Her face was in shadow, but her form was illuminated by a harsh, bright light. Her posture wasn't one of defeat, but of defiance. The crowd in the background was a blur of indistinct, mocking shapes. The painting wasn't about the humiliation. It was about the moment of climbing out, of choosing to rise. It was titled The Ascent. "That one sold first," Arthur remarked, "to an anonymous buyer from New York. Paid double the asking price." Izzy just nodded, a complicated emotion in her eyes. She had needed to paint it, to exorcise the memory, and reclaim it as her own. As if on cue, a newspaper clipping on a nearby table caught her eye. It was from a society gossip column, dated about 6 months after the incident. Someone had tucked it into a book on the table. It detailed the swift and spectacular fall from grace of the Davenport and Preston families. Daniel Preston never worked in high finance again. The scandal of being fired so publicly by Arthur Vance made him untouchable. Chad, stripped of his father's name and fortune, had reportedly dropped out of college and drifted into obscurity. The Davenports had fared even worse. Their over-leveraged company, unable to secure new lines of credit after being blacklisted by the Vance financial network, had crumbled. They'd had to sell the Bel Air estate, the source of their pride, and the stage for Izzy's humiliation. The last anyone had heard, Tiffany was working as a sales associate at a mid-range boutique in the valley, a world away from the designer clothes and poolside parties she once lorded over. Their downfall was not a dramatic bolt of lightning, but a slow, quiet unraveling, a consequence of a character that was as hollow as their boasts. Izzy felt no joy reading it, only a distant, quiet sadness for the waste of it all. Her success was not built on their failure. Her triumph was not their punishment. Her victory was that she was here in this gallery, surrounded by her art and people who valued her while they were simply gone. Her best revenge was the life she had built. A young woman, a student from the Art Institute, approached Izzy nervously, her eyes wide with admiration. "Miss Rossi, your work is the reason I started painting portraits. It's so honest. Can I ask you what your inspiration is?" Izzy looked past the student, her gaze meeting Arthur's across the room. He gave her a slight, encouraging nod. She then turned back to the young woman, a genuine warm smile on her face. "My inspiration," Izzy said, her voice clear and strong. "I find inspiration in dignity, in the strength people show when they think no one is watching, in the quiet, everyday moments of courage. That's where the real art is." She had turned the ugliest moment of her life into the foundation of her beautiful future, not by seeking revenge, but by embracing the very quality her tormentors had tried and failed to strip from her. And on the walls of the gallery, the truth shone brighter than any Bel Air sun. 5 years had passed since the night of Izzy's first gallery opening. The art world, once an impenetrable fortress, had become her home. She was no longer just Isabella Rossi, the promising new artist. She was Professor Rossi at the San Francisco Art Institute, the very institution she once dreamed of attending. She guided young, hungry artists, seeing her own past desperation and hope reflected in their eyes. Her own work had evolved, growing richer and more complex, and she was preparing for a major retrospective at a museum in Los Angeles. Success had not made her complacent. It had made her more grateful, more keenly aware of the slender, unlikely thread of fate that had led her here. Her life had found a comfortable rhythm. It was a life of quiet mornings, with coffee and a sketchbook, afternoons filled with the vibrant chaos of the teaching studio, and evenings spent in front of a canvas, her truest confidant. The memory of the pool, of the laughter, of the soul-crushing humiliation had faded. It was no longer a raw wound, but a silvery scar, a part of her history that had forged her, but no longer defined her. Arthur Vance remained her steadfast friend and mentor, their conversations a grounding force in her life. He was older now, frailer, but his mind and his spirit were as sharp as ever. On a cool, foggy Tuesday afternoon, Izzy was tucked into a worn leather armchair at The Page and the Palette, a beloved independent bookstore and cafe in a quiet neighborhood. The air smelled of old paper and roasting coffee beans. It was her sanctuary, a place where she could sketch the world anonymously. She was working on a series of studies of hands, the gnarled hands of an old man reading a newspaper, the delicate hands of a woman cradling a mug, the restless hands of a student highlighting a textbook. A shadow fell over her sketchbook. "Excuse me," a quiet voice said. "Are you Isabella Rossi?" Izzy looked up, a polite, practiced smile, ready for a fan or a student. The smile froze on her lips. The woman standing before her was both a stranger and a ghost. The face was thinner, etched with fine lines of weariness around the eyes and mouth that hadn't been there before. The once icy blue eyes were now muted, clouded with an unfamiliar emotion that looked like apprehension. Her hair was a simple, unadorned brown, pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore a simple grey sweater and jeans. There was no designer logo in sight. But it was her. It was Tiffany Davenport. Izzy's heart gave a single hard thud against her ribs. The cafe with its comforting smells and quiet hum suddenly felt airless. The pencil felt slick in her hand. For a moment she was 22 again, shivering and drenched, the sound of cruel laughter roaring in her ears. "Yes," Izzy managed to say, her voice tighter than she intended. Tiffany flinched at her tone, seeming to shrink into herself. I know this is incredibly forward of me. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I saw you through the window. I live a few blocks from here." She wrung her hands, a nervous gesture that was so alien on the woman Izzy remembered. "My name is Tiffany." She didn't offer her last name, as if it were a thing of shame. "I know who you are," Izzy said flatly. She made no move to invite Tiffany to sit. An awkward, heavy silence stretched between them. The cafe patrons around them remained oblivious, lost in their own worlds. "I don't expect you to talk to me," Tiffany said, her voice barely a whisper. "I just wanted to say, I've followed your career. Your work is incredible. It's beautiful." The compliment coming from these lips was so jarring that Izzy didn't know how to respond. She simply stared her artist's eye, taking in the details of this new Tiffany. The arrogant queen of Bel Air was gone, replaced by someone who looked haunted. "Why are you here, Tiffany?" Izzy asked, her voice softening just a fraction. Tiffany took a deep breath as if steeling herself. "There's something I have to tell you, something I need to confess." She glanced at the empty chair opposite Izzy. "May I please? It will only take a minute." Hesitantly, Izzy gave a curt nod. Tiffany sat down gingerly on the edge of the seat, as if she didn't deserve the comfort. "After that day, at the party," she began, her eyes fixed on the tabletop. "Everything fell apart. Everything Arthur Vance said would happen, happened. My father's business collapsed. We lost the house. We lost everything. My friends, they disappeared overnight." She gave a short, bitter laugh that held no humor. "It turns out their loyalty was mortgaged, too." Izzy listened, her expression unreadable. She felt no satisfaction, no schadenfreude. There was only a strange emptiness in hearing the clinical summary of a life's destruction. "I had to get a job," Tiffany continued. "A real job. I started as a stockroom clerk at a department store. $12 an hour. My hands got calluses. My feet ached at the end of every day. For the first time in my life, I knew what it felt like to be tired. Not bored, but truly bone-deep tired. For the first time, I knew what it felt like to be invisible, to be looked through by customers, to be treated like a piece of furniture." She looked up, and for the first time, Izzy saw a glimmer of genuine, painful self-awareness in her eyes. "And all I could think about was you. I thought about how you carried that tray, how you served us with a professionalism I had never known. You were tired too, but you had a grace I couldn't comprehend. I had mocked you for having a dream, while I had nothing but my father's money." "About 2 years ago," Tiffany said, her voice dropping lower, "I was in a better place. I'd worked my way up to an office manager position. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I earned it. And I heard about your first exhibition. I read a review online, and it mentioned a particular painting. Izzy knew which one. The Ascent." Tiffany nodded, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. "I had to see it. I flew to San Francisco for 1 day and went to the gallery. I stood in front of that painting for an hour. You captured it perfectly. Not my cruelty, not the laughter, but your strength, the moment you chose to pull yourself out. In that painting, you weren't a victim. You were a survivor." A cold realization began to dawn on Izzy. "The anonymous buyer," she breathed. "From New York. That was you." "Yes," Tiffany whispered, her shame palpable. "I used almost all of my savings. I had to own it. At first I think it was a form of self-punishment. I hung it in my small apartment, and every day it was the first thing I saw when I woke up, and the last thing I saw before I slept. It was a reminder of the horrible person I was. But over time, it changed." She looked directly at Izzy now, her gaze pleading. "It stopped being about my shame, and started being about your resilience. It reminded me that even after a fall you can choose to climb. It inspired me to be better, to be kinder. I started volunteering. I went back to school at night. That painting, it didn't just document the end of my old life. It became the cornerstone of my new one." She reached into her purse and pulled out a large, sealed envelope. She pushed it across the table. "It belongs to you," Tiffany said. "It's the deed of ownership and the gallery receipt. I can't keep it. It feels stolen. Please take it back. I don't deserve to own a piece of your story." Izzy stared at the envelope, then at the woman in front of her. The years of resentment, the phantom sting of humiliation, it all seemed to dissolve in the face of this raw, painful confession. Forgiveness wasn't a transaction, and this wasn't about absolution. It was about recognizing a shared, flawed humanity. Slowly, Izzy pushed the envelope back across the table. "No," she said softly. Tiffany looked up, confused. "But you bought it, Tiffany," Izzy said, her voice gentle but firm. "It's yours. What you did that day was wrong. It hurt me deeply. But the person you are today, that person isn't the same girl by the pool." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Maybe you should keep it, not as a reminder of what you did to me, but as a reminder of what you did for yourself afterwards. You climbed out of your own pool. The painting isn't about me anymore. It's about you, too." For the second time that afternoon, Tiffany Davenport began to cry. But this time, the tears weren't of shame or regret. They were tears of release. A weight she had been carrying for nearly a decade had finally been lifted, not by a facile, "I forgive you," but by a profound act of grace. "Thank you," Tiffany choked out. "Thank you, Isabella." She stood up, gathered what little remained of her composure, and walked out of the cafe, leaving Izzy alone with her sketchbook and the lingering echoes of a past that had finally been laid to rest. Izzy picked up her pencil, her hand steady, and on a fresh page she began to sketch the hands of the woman who had just left hands that were no longer clenched in arrogance, but open in a gesture of profound and unexpected redemption. Isabella's story is a powerful reminder that true worth isn't measured by the clothes you wear, the house you own, or the name you carry. It's measured by your character, your resilience, and the dignity you hold on to when the world tries to take it away. While Tiffany and Chad's laughter echoed for only a moment, the ripples of their cruelty destroyed their own gilded world. In contrast, Isabella's quiet strength, noticed by one discerning eye, became the catalyst for a future she had only dreamed of. Her story shows us that kindness is a form of power, and integrity is an investment that yields the greatest returns. If Izzy's story of resilience and unexpected justice moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need a reminder that character is everything. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories that uncover the extraordinary in the ordinary. What are your thoughts on Arthur Vance's actions? Let us know in the comments below.